Hello, welcome to CIO Leadership Live Australia. I'm Kathy O'Sullivan, Editor-in-Chief for Foundry's flagship enterprise brands, CIO and CSO. Joining me today is Marcelo Dantas, who is the Chief Information Officer at Atomic Group. Hi, Marcelo. How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. So look, I love chatting to CIOs about where they got their start and their career history to date. So can you tell us a bit more about how you started out in IT and your career progression?
So when I was a kid, I used to be very good in mathematics and physics, and I always had a bit of curiosity about computer graphics, not so much in terms of the graphical design, but how it all hangs together, how the mathematical model can actually get the shapes and replicate the real world. And that sort of started gravitating me towards computer science. So I decided to do a bachelor degree in computer science. And when I started, I sort of fell in love with software development. It was almost like solving puzzles every day when you have a problem and you basically put a solution together. And I started going through the university. I learned how to make things efficient about complexity of algorithms. And it just kept on making tighter and tighter into that domain. And then I completely dropped computer graphics and shift more into software engineering roles and architecture. So I started my career as a software developer. And I've been in the industry more half of my life. So I've been almost 23 years in the IT industry. And I was fortunate enough to be across many different domains. So I did a lot of consulting in the early days. So I worked on industries such as insurance, health, utilities, airlines, share registry, quite a broad, diverse range, and ranging from mobile applications to enterprise system, point of sale, secure system, medical devices. So this was quite a bit of a mixed experience, which sort of gave me the foundations to assume the role that I currently have on.
So certainly a lot of industries you've worked in, as you said there, and now you're at Atomic Group. So can you tell us a bit more about the organization and what you and your team look after there?
So Atomic is the largest listed registry in Australia. So we've got an integrated cloud native platform that manages listed registry, funds registry, employee share plans, and investor analytics. And in addition to our technology solution, we offer a range of professional services, which covers company secretaries, CFO innovations, investor and media relations, employees, environment, social governance, just to name a few. And my team looks after all the technology in the business, which includes product engineering, cybersecurity, and infrastructure.
So quite a broad range that your team look after there. And I know that you and your team recently were involved in one of the largest ever registry services transitions in Australia. So can you tell us a bit more about what that involved?
So transition is a process that we call when a client moves service providers. So when you are a listed company in Australia or a fund manager, you can choose who your registry provider is, and you're free to move between providers as you choose. So when that happens, the former registry needs to give us all the data of that client in a format of their choosing. We've got no control over how the data is going to look like, how it's going to be given to us. And then we have to make sense of the data, massage it, and import it in our system. So usually there are a few steps which happen during a transition, which is something that we do almost every weekend since I started for the past 9 years. The first step is to reconcile the data. So our system has a mandatory data integrity check. So if you try to import a data that doesn't reconcile, our system is not going to let you. So we don't allow any shortcuts to happen. And often the data comes with pretty poor data integrity, negative balances, somebody that has minus 1,000 shares, or when you piece all the transactions together, they don't equate to the holding balance, or addresses missing postcode. Depending where the data comes from, it can be incredibly terrible, or it can be very easy. So it's a bit of a Russian roulette. And that process, it may take half an hour if you're lucky, and then it may take the whole day if you're unlucky. And there are other variables, a time of the day that the data is given to you. Sometimes you get at 6 a.m. in the morning, sometimes you got 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which makes it very difficult as well. After we finish massaging the data, we will import it into a test system, and somebody from the registry operations will validate the data, check that we imported it correctly, and then we'll do one more time into the production system.
So you've mentioned some of the challenges there in that would be involved in a project like this, especially with cleaning up the data, and terrible data makes for terrible systems often. So can you elaborate, I guess, on some of the other big challenges that were involved in this project and how you and the team overcame them?
So this project involved in doing this 185 times. So we're basically transitioning 185 clients. And the intention was always to do that in a single weekend. We didn't want to drag all this migration process for a very long period of time. So it is a process that's very well known to us, but when you try to do that 185 times, time is not on your side. So it demanded a very large planning and preparation to help us getting across the line. So I'll give a bit of an overview of all these steps and the preparation we've put together. So the very first thing is to get all the data under control. So you would get the export of all the 185 clients, and then you need to start reconciling and finding the problems. And you can't just find the problem and fix it. You need to fix the problem in a way that is repeatable, because you'll be doing this multiple times until we actually go live. And sometimes a bit like playing a game, like you run the reconciliation, get 15,000 transactions that are not reconciling, and then you have to go back in time, trying to work out what they were trying to do, what would be the correct way, and putting a solution together to fix it. So after we got all the data under control, then we need to test it. So we would load all the data into a test environment and hand that over to our registry operations team to validate. And they would check the issue capital matches, check the reports for the top holders, validate that it all looks correct. So once you go through those two steps, then you check your first box, like you get the confidence, yes, I can do this, like I can get the data under control. It got signed off, so we're ready to go. But there are a few more variables, as you may imagine, because you want to do that quickly, fast in one day. So now that you know that you can do it, the second question, can you do it fast enough? And there are multiple variables. There is the human element. So how long would take my team to go through those 185 and give them all reconciled to me? And then the second aspect would be how long would it take to load them all into a queue, which is used to import them into a test system. And the other variable is how long it would take a test system to actually ingest all the data so that we can send it off to the team for testing. And lastly, after it's ready for test, how long would actually take the humans to do that twice on the day for 185 customers? So you start working away from the top. So as I mentioned before, we're a cloud native platform, and we do have the benefit of scaling up our infrastructure. But as you know, you can't just scale up to infinity, because you do have bottlenecks at a certain point. The database is only one, and you can't really get the database to run at 100% CPU all the time. So we were playing with the resources to find what was the sweet spot. So we had a target. We wanted to get all imported in under 6 hours, because the data would come around midnight. If we import in 6 hours, when the team come in the morning, everything is ready for them. So we start playing with different variables, which how many components loading the data would have, how many messages we get per poll, measuring how much CPU was used for each of the components, and then measuring how much CPU the database was taking. And then we found the spot where the CPU was 40%, everything looked good, it was given the time. So we assumed that that would be a good way to go. But I don't like leaving anything to chance. So we found that there was a sweet spot, but is it really the sweet spot? So you have to try it. So we did a full end-to-end run. So we got the data at midnight. I got my team to give me the data. It took them about 40 minutes. I used the number of components to load them up and then queue the messages and check in the end. It did take 6 hours, check the CPU, was under 40%, then check. So that was, yeah, there was a good check. So there was one last step, which is now after everything is ready, how many humans you need to actually test it within one day, because we want to wrap it up over one weekend. So the operations team gone through that exercise, and they figure out how many people. And then after all of that, we've done one more time. So we've done full end-to-end, loaded everything again, made sure it took 5 hours, made sure that it was achievable to finish the testing within one day. So when we walked on the Saturday, we had all the possible variables that we could prepare for ready to go. So we knew effective how long everything was going to take from the dot. We knew the data quality was under control. We knew the testing was going to pass. So it was pretty big preparation. When you see the announcement with successful transition, that number of customers, which was about 1.5 million holders and more than 10 million transactions, and we fixed more than tens of thousands of incorrect transactions in that process. It sounds simple, but there was lots and lots of preparation, and we were very proud of the result. It was quite a lot of work, but yeah, super pleased.
And working on the weekends and late nights as well. I'm sure there were some pizzas and beers involved in that as well when you're all done and dusted.
Lots of
So,
love.
Marcelo, tell us a bit more about your approach to technology strategy and how it aligns to the overall business strategy.
It's a good question. So it all starts from the top. So you have to have a very good understanding of the corporate strategy. So basically, my team enables the business because we're technology-enabled business. So I need to understand which phase the business is at and what our immediate goals are. And as I joined Atomic 9 years ago, I was actually the first employee. When you look through the strategy over the last 9 years, from a startup to a mature business that we are today, it changed considerably. The risk profile is very different 9 years ago than what it is currently. So we were willing to take more risks at the beginning because you have less resources, you sort of establish yourself. So the strategy has an impact in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a business. It is grow the client base, it is increase operation efficiency, it is mitigating the risks by reducing manual process and automating more processes. And so once you get that initial view, then there is the next step, which is collaborating with the other executives and mapping your objectives and key results. So I don't work in silos because basically I rely on the operations team to leverage what my team builds and to help me guiding what they need on the day-to-day. And I also need input from business development in what the clients are expecting to see in our system. And I need input from the clients themselves, which comes from the customer success team. So in order for my strategy to be effective, I need to have a pretty broader collaboration with all the executives in the organization. And Andrew Wilson, who is our CEO, he came up with a process last year that I thought was very productive. So he created the concept of a strategy on a page. So each of us executives need to summarize in a page what was our strategy for the next 12 months. And what that process actually triggered, it just made abundantly clear how dependent my strategy is on everyone else's strategy. So for example, people in culture were implementing a new HR system, so they needed input from my team to make that happen. So I was in their strategy, they were in mine. And same thing for finance, they were implementing a new ERP system. I was in their strategy, they were in mine. And I have a very tight coupling with the registry operations because I build the registry system that they use on the day-to-day. And obviously all the cybersecurity initiatives that we do pretty much has a huge impact across all the organization. So once you lay everything in a slide, collaborate with everyone, then present that to each other, that summarizes a pretty beautiful corporate strategy that fits quite nice with everyone's goals. And the next step is obviously measuring because you only as good if you can track what your objectives are and make sure that you on track. And that fits in your next exercise of prioritizing to get the high impact activities done first so you can bring that value to the organization sooner. So my team is probably the one that has more dependencies on everyone else's because we sort of enable the whole business to operate.
Absolutely. Certainly a key function of technology today in many organizations. Now, you spoke earlier about the risk profile, and of course, you and your team look after cybersecurity at Atomic. So what's your approach to cybersecurity, particularly given the environment in which Australia has found itself in the last few years?
Yes, so my view is that cybersecurity has to be a foundational pillar within the business. It's not something that is a consequence. You need to plan and you need to have at the forefront of your mind in everything you do. So it starts very early when you onboard an employee into the business. So there is obviously the principle of the least privilege. You need to ensure that they have enough access to work, but they don't have more access than what's required to perform their job. And as part of that onboard, it's important to train them on the cybersecurity awareness, have a cybersecurity program, help educating them what are the threats in our environment, what are the common things that people are trying to deceive us into doing the wrong thing, what are the fraud threats and attempts that we get on a day-to-day to help them be part of the proactive defense of the business. Lots of the data breaches are because lack of training, so you need to make sure your staff is equipped to help you protecting your assets. And the same feeds back into the offboarding. When somebody leaves the organization, you need to ensure that all the access is removed and everything is returned back to the business. And then it starts flowing into the next part, which is understanding where your data is. So you need to have a pretty clear view of all your information assets, like where the data, what is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability levels. So once you know where the data is and the level of care you need to take, that will feed into the next step, which is doing a bit of a risk assessment. So you have to identify what are the risks of confidentiality being breached or the system becoming unavailable. And that will start feeding into the overall strategy. What are the controls that we need to put in place? What we have is sufficient, or do we want to continue to improve our risk mitigation to try to reduce the likelihood of any data breach or any system unavailability to happen? And this has a massive flow-on effect on everything else. One key area that's often overlooked is suppliers. So once you work with a third-party vendor, you need to ensure that their security practices at least comparable to yours, if it's not better. Because if you use a vendor that's unreliable and they've got hold of your sensitive data, they have a breach, you indirectly have a breach. So often you may get pressured by your stakeholders that you need to get a supplier quickly to solve a particular problem, but you can't cut corners. You need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a bad position by not selecting the right vendor to join you. And this fits now into my favorite part, which is the engineering and architecture. So once you understand the data that you have and the availability requirements, then this starts feeding into the architecture. How do you protect the database? How do you segregate the network to make it harder for an intruder to get where you don't want them to be? And this needs to be a constant improvement into your environment. So all the engineers, they need to be aware of the best security practice when they're coding, when they're reviewing each other codes, when they're designing solutions. And constantly, as part of a release cycle, you need to check that you're on the right track, run vulnerability scanning, make sure that you're not creating risks that you didn't have before. Run scanners on the third-party libraries that you use. If you have a library that is vulnerable, like Log4j was a couple of years ago, then your system is vulnerable. So you need to do that risk assessment every time that you do a new software release to make sure you're not leaving anything to chance. And lastly, on talking about the criticals, you probably see that I can talk about this the whole day. So the other important part is the patching of the devices and systems and libraries. So often when a vulnerability is found, then the attackers will try exploiting the vulnerability to get into your environment. So once a vendor publishes a security patch, you need to get that applied immediately. And often that gets overlooked. And this is one of the largest reasons as well that people get breached. So those are probably the main areas that I would touch. But yeah, it's quite, if I can summarize, it has to be embedded on everything that we do. It has to be in the forefront of your mind. And yeah, education is very important. And yeah, I often say to Andrew Wilson, our CEO, if there is one week and I don't make a cybersecurity enhancement in our environment, I start thinking I'm not doing enough. Even if it's a small firewall change or an improvement in the antivirus rule, whatever it is, every week I have to do something to just give me closure that I am proactively trying to defend our systems.
Indeed, I know it's a top priority for all CISOs and CIOs at the moment. And look, you spoke there around third-party suppliers and vendors and the importance of ensuring that that's secure. And, you know, as you mentioned, there's been a number of breaches that have come through third parties in the past. But aside from cybersecurity, what do you look for when you're choosing technology partners? And what does a good partnership look like to you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the very first point that we touched right before, the cybersecurity practice needs to be aligned with ours. So we need to get comfort that they would take similar level of care that we would to our source code or data, so whatever they're handling. And the second aspect is the technological capability and the cultural fit. So I always say that I would not select a partner if I would not recruit them as a full-time employee. So they would go through similar process, our recruitment process, not as detailed, but you just make sure that they can work with us and they will thrive in our environment. And my preference is always to have them work embedded in our ecosystem and not outsource the solution to them. So for the technology partners that we use, we mix them with our in-house teams. So we run sprints together so we can collaborate and work towards a solution together. And this helps with our understanding and our acceleration to whatever they're helping us enable in the business. And the last aspect, which is the most important, is focus on the handover. So once they finish that work, I need to have confidence that they will educate us how we can manage that moving forward. Because often technology partners dump a solution on you and walk away, and then you look at it, say, what do I do with this? So having that handover process into the detail and make sure my team is comfortable to move that moving forward, enhance and maintain it is pretty critical.
So, Marcelo, it seems there's not a day that goes by without AI or Gen AI being mentioned. So, do you see any opportunities for this technology within your organization, or is it something that you're already actively exploring?
Yes, so I personally believe there is lots of opportunity around generative AI from two different angles. So one is the transformation effect on the product itself. So what we can embed in our ecosystem that would add additional value to the customers and improve the user experience by leveraging generative AI. And the other aspect is internally for our staff, if they have access to tools such as ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Copilot, would they become more efficient at their job? And I personally believe that the answer is yes to both. Thinking from a product perspective, we've been exploring a few different use cases, but I'll give you a brief overview of a couple that are my favorites. So one is improving the customer service by leveraging generative AI. So create a language model specialized in our domain. When investors have query about a particular event or about how to do things, instead of picking the phone and call us, they can interface with the AI, get that feeling they're talking to a human, get a pretty accurate and instant response, and reduce the volume of calls coming through. And this will do for our staff, will actually make their job more exciting because the call coming through to them will be more challenging calls where they're solving a problem, they're speaking with a human that genuinely needs help rather than just acting as redirecting them when to go. And the second opportunity that I see on the product side is a completely change in user experience. I use generative AI a lot I talk to ChatGPT when I'm driving, trying to learn new things. I find the potential remarkable. So I strongly think that over time, the user interface will be more verbal rather than you open up your phone, picking up an app, knowing where to go, navigating through and get things done. So I can just pick up my phone, transfer $1 million to someone else, and the phone will do the transfer because it trusts my voice, know who I am. So we're looking how we can actually embed that into our portals. So try to create ways for people to interface with our functionality without necessarily need to know where it is and navigating through them, which I think is a pretty interesting goal. So let's see 2 years from now whether I'll speak to my phone or if I'll continue using apps. And on the operation efficiency side for the internal stuff, we've been trialing a few different tools. I tried them all and I continue trying. When you monitor, it's a bit of like a run. So ChatGPT is better, Anthropic is better. They keep sort of overtaking each other, and I keep trying to see what the differences are. But for our stuff that generates content, writing mails or writing notices, media releases, you can get quite a bit of an acceleration by getting a tool, give the dot points, get it to put it together, and then add your style to it. So I probably gain about 1 or 2 hours a day every day by just helping, like putting some content together. And then these 2 hours that I can continue work on infrastructure, architecture, something that I find more exciting than just writing content. So yeah, lots of potential.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? And it's going to be really interesting over the next few months and years how it develops and as it becomes not just an emerging technology, but a linchpin technology for us and our organizations. So listen, you mentioned earlier about your plan on a page and how, that you are integral to so many parts of the organization, whether it's HR or finance, that, what they want to do, technology, there's a huge reliance on you and the team. So then I'm keen to know, Marcelo, how you as a CIO, how you demonstrate that value of what your team brings to the organization and how you collaborate with your peers on the exec and the board.
Yes. Yeah, I would summarize as a key word, which is transparency. Like it's very important to be transparent where you are and what you're currently trying to achieve. So I've got regular catch-ups with Andrew, our CEO, and I walk him through a very detailed report, which walks through cybersecurity initiatives that we're implementing, the next product releases, each product stream, what the focus is on, upcoming transitions, risks and incidents that happened or being noted over the past few weeks, and general stats in terms of our response time for tickets that come through our general help desk. And that report, yeah, I know that he summarized that report to the board as part of his CEO report. So I give him content that gets passed to the board. So he helps me getting that transparency across to every single board meeting. I often present to the board meetings when there is a particular item of interest. So every 3 months or so, I'm invited to participate, which also helps me getting my message across. And in terms of the whole company, again, it goes back into transparency. I remember about 8 years ago, I was catching up with my former CEO, and he told me, every month you have to write a technology update to the whole company, explaining in detail what your team is up to. And ever since I haven't missed any. As a matter of fact, I got one yesterday. And that is pretty important from several lenses. So one, you giving the company insight of what's happening in every single domain, cybersecurity, product engineering, systems and implementations. But it also gives an opportunity to celebrate the team's achievements because we do monthly releases. We're very proud that we adding value to the business. And it's always important to call it out when you send an email, summarize the achievements and show the team that you're proud of the work they achieved. It also sends a pretty good message. So, and also the other part is having no barriers. Like anyone in the business, they can come to me at any point in time and ask me any questions. And the executive team, we work pretty closely together. It's a very open plan office. We see each other every day. So it all goes back into transparency and communication.
Indeed. And look, you've been in the industry now, as you said, for more than 2 decades. And I'm sure you would have seen some changes in that time. So what do you think are the biggest challenges facing a modern day CIO?
Yeah. So I probably can mention a few items. So the first one is keeping up with the technology pace. So technology evolves at a very rapid pace. So if you build a system 10 years ago and how you build a system now is completely different, your architecture changed, the whole standard changed. So it is challenge to continue modernizing your application so that it is still keeping up with as the technology evolve. If you don't do, you will get cornered with a few issues. So one is you will have trouble recruiting people because the young talent, they want to work with an architecture that is exciting with newer technologies. If you give them something from 15 years ago, you may get them from a couple of months, but they will likely move somewhere else. And there is also the challenge of things reaching the end of life. They stop supporting a particular framework they use, and that opens up you for vulnerabilities. So it's always important to find a strategy to continuously improve your infrastructure environment, your product to not fall too behind, which is difficult because things do change quite rapidly. The second challenge we touched before, cybersecurity is getting harder and harder and harder. We get people trying to exploit our environment almost every night. You see people scanning and you see people trying to find low-hanging fruits. And it's just going to get harder with the improvements on AI. The bad actors will leverage AI to automate how you try to breach into someone, and then we have to build our own AI to defend against the bad guys' AI. So cybersecurity needs to be on top of our mind all the time, and it will just continues becoming harder. The other one I touched before is talent retention. Is a very competitive market in Australia. Recruiting talent, there's lots of companies competing for the same talent. So how you give the talent an environment and a system and a platform that will make you more exciting than the job next door. And it is not always about the money. Like sometimes young people starting their career, they want to have exposure. Like I was fortunate enough to be exposed to many different industries. So if you offer them more money but don't give an environment that they will thrive, likely they won't last in your organization.
So just on that, Marcelo, how do you create that environment? You know, that environment of innovation, inspiring creativity in the team, feeling like they're learning and developing within the organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. So usually trust is a pretty big factor. So you have to build the trust with your team and give them the confidence that they are trusted and integral part of the team, and continue promoting collaboration internally with the team itself. And most importantly, show that it's okay to fail. Like we're all humans. We're not going to get things right all the time. If you create a culture of fear that you can make no mistakes, then it will sort of prevent innovation from happening because everyone will be operating within a very strict set of guidelines. So once you stimulate them to experiment, try different things, and then if it fails, you just pick yourself up and then we move on and correct. It will start giving more confidence that it is okay to experiment. I've been very fortunate with my team at Atomic. Majority of my team have been with me for many, many years. So I've got some of my initial developers that joined me 9 years ago. They're still part of my team, and they help me foster in that culture that everyone is welcome. You have to collaborate, whiteboard the design. Got an ideas, let us know. We want some time to experiment, not a problem. And the other aspect is helping them innovating as well. For example, with the artificial intelligence, we had pretty specific ideas in how we wanted to experiment. So we engaged AWS to let them know we wanted to experiment with the Bedrock framework. And they gave us access to some material that we presented to our teams. They would like you to experiment with those things, would you be open to? So sometimes you need to help them choosing what to innovate, and sometimes you need to empower them to come back to you and say, I want to try something different. Is it okay to spend the time?
Now, you spoke earlier about mistakes. And of course, we're all humans. We all make mistakes. And often the biggest lessons that we learn about ourselves are when we do make those mistakes. So is there anything when you reflect back on that, even though it might have been uncomfortable at the time, that you really learned a lot from and has shaped you to be a better leader?
Yes, what comes to mind at the very early days when I became a technology leader in a leadership role, it was an environment where we were constrained by budget, and I wanted to create a team with specialized skill sets. But when you speak to the investors, they were adamant that you could build a technology company with just engineers. And my vision at the point, I wanted to have roles such as QAs or business analysts. So what ended up happening, I ended up taking over those roles myself because I continually wanted my developers to have an unlimited runway for them to continue developing so that we could deliver to the business. And by doing that, that created a problem for myself because first I was solving that on my personal time, which created a big toll on my personal life. And from the lenses of the investors, there was no problem, right? They said Marcelo is not going to get a business analyst, and there is no problem. He's still delivering releases going through every month. So probably when I reflect, I should have some level of controlled failure, let things fall off the tracks a little bit, just sort of help proving that there is a value in bringing additional skill set to the organization. Because if you just take that on your own hands, then for the lenses of who is looking outside, there is no problem. Everything is ticking along. But yeah, working 15 hours a day is not sustainable. So it's probably something I would do different when I start a new role. I'll be more adamant in how I would like to shape the team. And in essence, that gave it a lot of respect. So my team saw that I was working hard to make sure that they could do their job without having any interruption. But yeah, there are other ways that you can gain the respect of your team rather than working too hard.
And is there any other advice that you give to aspiring IT leaders?
Two things that comes to mind. So the first one, I always focus in creating a solution for a problem and not finding a problem for a solution. So often people come to you with some technology solution and they want you to create a problem for it, but it's not how it works. So no one should ever come to you, I want you to build a cloud system. They should come to you, I want you to build a resilient system that scales, performant, and secure, and then cloud is the solution for that. So often early in the career, somebody said, I want you to use blockchain, and then you kind of create a solution that is not really fit for purpose because you're being pushed by someone. So always question, make sure that you're using the right solution for the right problem. And the other one is just create an environment where it's okay to fail. No one is perfect. Like your engineers will make mistakes, your testers will let things slip through, and that's perfectly normal. If you create a culture of fear, people are not going to be loyal, people are going to move, and people will get an environment which is friendly. Every time that a mistake is made, we learn from it. We understand the root cause, we improve our practice, we prevent it from happening again. So just give that impression that, you can't create a culture of fear.
Indeed. And look, you've already had a massive project this year, but is there anything else in the pipeline for the rest of 2024? What's important to you in the year ahead?
Yes, we've got a very busy year ahead of us. It started pretty busy, and it will continue being busy. So we've got about 10 releases in our roadmap between now and December. And as part of the releases, we will continue investing in artificial intelligence, especially generative AI, and try to shape how our system can benefit from those technologies. And I've got an ambition that I've been working on this side, and I'm very confident that is achievable, and we've almost got the blueprints ready. So currently we use Amazon Web Services as our cloud provider, and we want to shift into a hybrid cloud model where our platform runs simultaneously in multiple cloud providers to have the ultimate disaster recovery. So we've been having conversations with different cloud providers and put a blueprint how that would look like. And there are some interesting technology and architectural challenges how to replicate the data across the two systems. But the more I looked at it, the more I get convinced that it's possible. So that's one side project I've got on the side that I really want to continue exploring between now and the end of the year.
Lots to keep you busy. Well, Marcelo Dantas, thank you so much for joining us on CIO Leadership Live today.
Thank you for having me.